They appear to be exactly 100 times our size, Axe said calmly. How? Jake wondered. It is possible. Perhaps I made a miscalculation when I calibrated the shrinking device. Axe, make a simple mathematical error? No. More likely the Hellmacrons guessed we tried to use the shrinking ray, I said. Guessed and sabotaged it before they bailed out of their ship, Jake said. The little stinkers, Cassie said. Yeah, the Hellmacrons, the race that put colorblind engineers in their engine rooms, the race that can't figure out how to properly manage hostages, the race that is currently being held up by boogers. These guys rigged their own shrink ray so that the Animorphs somehow managed to manipulate it with animal surgery tools, they'd shrink too much. Axe making a mistake would have made so much more sense. At no point had the Hellmacrons shown this level of intelligence and foresight. Except for, the whole being technologically advanced stuff. Seriously, how did these idiots invent space travel anyway? For reference sake, the size of a Hellmacron is usually given as 1/16 of an inch. So if the Animorphs are indeed 1/100th the size of a Hellmacron, that makes them just shy of 16 microns, or roughly the size of a mold spore. Hey, I said, it's really dark in here. That may be... Cassie's thoughts stop as her head became more human than bird. Another advantage, she continued. We can morph animals that see well in the dark. How do we know Hellmacrons don't see well in the dark? Tobias asked. We don't, Jake said grimly. I think I do, Cassie said. Marco and I were inside a Hellmacron ship. It was very brightly lit. So we can assume Hellmacrons need bright light to see, Axe said. Or at least they do not like the dark. What kind of logic is that? If we're under the impression that the Hellmacrons have some base level of competence, then it seems natural that they want ship operations as well as possible to minimize the chances of hitting the wrong button and stuff. All this tells you about Hellmacron biology is that they are not hurt by bright lights like Mogwai. It doesn't say anything about their ability to see in the dark. Owls see in the dark, but they are also capable of seeing during the daylight hours. Similar with cats. Maybe Hellmacrons don't have great night vision, but instead have thermal vision like a snake to complement their eyesight. Or maybe they have super alien echolocation. You can't make any assumptions of Hellmacrons' relation to the dark by how many light bulbs are in their ships. So the Animorphs try attacking the Hellmacrons, but even in their biggest morphs, they're no bigger than a Hellmacron's toe. They cut combat short when they realize they could seriously hurt Marco, so they retreat into negotiation tactics, saying they'll give the Hellmacrons the blue box while having their fingers crossed behind their backs. Sadly, they roll a 1 on their diplomacy checks and just make the Hellmacrons more mad, who make a dive down Marco's throat, accidentally dragging Rachel along with them. They wind up in the stomach. Was there air inside a stomach? Good question. And not one I had an answer to. What? Yes, you do have an answer. You totally have an answer. Rachel, you're one of 4 people in the world who have been swallowed alive before. Back in the time of dinosaurs, remember? Remember how there was no air? Okay, yes, it turns out there's air in Marco's stomach, but don't talk like this is something you haven't experienced before. We'll catch up with the Animorphs in a moment. It's time to check up on Marco. He's decided the best thing to do right now is try and break into the kid's apartment and steal his camera. He would ask a Chi to help him, but the ratty-looking Chi was still on guard. That meant that the camera, if not the kid, was still inside. For about half a second, I wondered if I should ask for his help. Maybe he could throw a hollow around me, make it easier to sneak into the apartment. Rejected the idea. It would probably violate the Chi's code of non-violence. What a joke. Yeah, I really guess that's what we're going for here. That the Chi's code of non-violence keeps them from infiltrating places. That thing they've been doing since number 10 the android. Pretty much the only thing they do. I get it, though. I get it. If they hadn't have come up with such a contrived, incorrect reason, then the Chi would have just ninja'd up, got in and detected, grabbed the camera, and got out in 20 seconds. And what would Marco do while the rest of the Animorphs mess around in his poop chute? The writers would have to... Come up with a smarter plot! So Marco uses a rusty old fire escape to get to the kid's room, but winds up face to face with a vicious pit bull, because pit bulls are the go-to when you think of vicious, dangerous dogs, an image so strong that some places have actually banned the breed from existing in their city limits and threatened to put down any pet pit bulls regardless of if they've actually hurt anyone. A strong image perpetuated by the media. Media like Animorphs number 42, The Journey. Wait, this was written by the animal emergency lady? What the fuck? So the vicious hell dog bites Marco on the hand, and he's forced to retreat without the camera, unable to morph to heal the injury. Back in Marco's gut, the rest of the Animorphs have caught up with Rachel. Cassie morphs Whale for everyone to ride on to avoid stomach acid, while the surviving Hellmacrons try to blast a hole through the stomach lining into a vein. Some of them don't survive the acid, which is bad news for Marco's thighs. Hellmacrons are just all carbs and empty calories. But don't worry about the dead, since Hellmacrons are fungible, not to be confused with Lunchables, which means that when one is killed, its mind is absorbed into the rest of the species. You'd think this might be an important plot point, or that it might go ways to explaining Hellmacron culture and flesh out their species beyond tiny joke aliens. But no, the real reason is that we can kill as many of these buggers as we want and not feel bad about it. Which is actually a really good reason. Kill them all. Anyway, yeah, the Hellmacrons blast a hole into an artery and swim into it in an attempt to get to Marco's heart. The Animorphs are surprised by this, since they assumed Hellmacrons would suffocate, but they don't seem to have a problem with having no air. Again, the Animorphs really need to stop assuming things about Hellmacron biology. But there was air on their spaceship, so of course they need air all the time. So the Animorphs do the only logical thing and follow in Hammerhead Sharkmorph, which proves, shall we say, interesting because they are literally surrounded by blood. They eventually get their morphs under control, swim into Marco's artery, and we get the arbitrary naming off the cells in blood scene, where Rachel sees a weird spiky thing that gets slurped up by a white mass. "This is amazing," Cassie said. "Axe and Jake just saw Marco's immune system fight off an invader. That Pac-Man was a white blood cell." "So, the spiky thing?" I asked. "A bacterium or a virus," Cassie said. "What kind?" "How should I know?" Cassie replied. "The important thing is that Marco's immune system is working." I would have to contest that claim, as it appears Marco's immune system is letting a bunch of aliens and sharks swim around it all willy-nilly. I'd say this immune system is rather underperforming. Back to Marco, he's getting really upset at his failure, and now with the cover of darkness, decides to take another stab at stealing the camera. No change in plan, really. Back up the fire escape, back through the window, only this time he brings a stake to throw and try to strike the dog with. Hey, it worked in Hugo's House of Horrors. Marco grabs the camera, but people hear the barking dog, and he's forced to go all R. Kelly and hide in the closet. Marco isn't thinking clearly, and he's suddenly irrationally angry, so he starts to morph Roach around the same time the Hellmacrons and Animorphs have reached Marco's heart. Jake orders him to stop, but Marco responds all flippant-like and finishes the morph, which thankfully doesn't kill Marco's occupants or flush them into Z-space. The Hellmacrons go kill crazy and start shooting up the place, and before you know it, Marco is dead. Okay. The Animorphs manage to grab a Hellmacron weapon and are finally a threat to them, so they use the beam to burrow out of Marco's roach body with their new Hellmacron prisoners. In another of Costello's poorly timed segments, leaving Marco's body takes almost 2 hours, though you'd never guess it by how fast the scene is paced. Everyone's bummed that Marco's dead, but then Cassie is all, "Wait, nothing kills a cockroach!" And they actually manage to bring Marco back to life from the dead with encouraging words. He remorphs, not acting like an asshole anymore, grabs the camera, carries the Animorphs and Hellmacrons back to the barn. The Animorphs are brought back to normal size, the Hellmacrons are allowed to charge their ship, and they leave. The camera is destroyed, and everyone goes home. Rachel gets curious and starts looking things up on the internet. Costello must like the internet a lot more than Applegate did. She eventually finds out that spiky thing she saw earlier it turns out Marco caught rabies from the dog bite, which explained his asshole behavior from before. It was rabies making his brain swell. We'll just forget that it takes weeks for rabies symptoms to begin, not a handful of hours. Bottom line, if Marco hadn't morphed to roach or anything else, he'd be dying. He wouldn't have known he had rabies, so he wouldn't have started the treatment in time. When he'd morphed in the kid's closet, almost 12 hours had already gone by. Other bottom line, it was clear to me that Marco had morphed not to upset Jake or to save his own skinny butt, not to betray us or because he valued his own life over ours. He morphed because the disease had already begun to twist his mind and distort his judgment. He'd morphed against direct orders because he was slowly going insane. This was good news. Marco wasn't dying, and with this interesting piece of information, I could get him off the hook with Jake and the others. I reached for the phone. Stopped. Smirked. Maybe in the morning. Oh, Rachel, you tease. Oh. That dog's gonna die. Post-book follow-up. Animorphs has had stupid filler books before, and there'll still be a few more coming up, but this has to be the most fillery filler book ever. You want to know a way to tell if your story is skippable nonsense? Shuffle the characters around. Do you have to change anything if different characters are playing different roles? Would this book be any different if Marco was the main narrator and they had to go inside Rachel? Or if Tobias had to go in Jake? Or if Cassie had to go into Marco? The narration style would be a touch different to match the characters, but the plot wouldn't have changed at all. The same events would have happened in the exact same order. And the Animorphs are not one-dimensional, interchangeable characters. You have to work to come up with a plot this unaffected by character. And it's a stupid plot that nobody was asking for, a plot that had been done better elsewhere. Making all the references to Fantastic Voyage and the Magic School Bus was a bad move. It's like the old saying that you should never mention a good movie in the middle of your bad movie. It just makes people think, I should be watching this instead of reading this crap book. The only way this idea would have been interesting is if they went to Axe and you got to explore kooky Andalite biology. If we're going to be this silly, show me something I haven't seen before. Don't take a stock plot and constantly remind us that it's a stock plot. So with an unimaginative plot that doesn't use the main characters well, that leaves the Hellmacrons themselves to do all the heavy lifting, and, well, ugh. Again, the Hellmacrons weren't unforgivably horrible the first time around. Yes, they were annoying and I never wanted any more of them, but they were new and shook things up a bit. But this time, they were just as annoying as before, but have now lost their new car smell. They crash into the story without any build-up or ceremony. They are just as smart or as stupid as the plot requires them to be, and we don't learn anything about them that we didn't learn the first time. The first book didn't seem to bear any consequences with the Hellmacrons either. In number 24, The Suspicion, the book ended with the suppressed Hellmacron males beginning their first move against the matriarchy. Here, some lip service is paid to that, but in effect, nothing has changed. There's just the occasional bickering among the Hellmacrons on whose sex is superior. I think a good Hellmacron story would be a challenge, but possible, and the first step would be to find a new direction to explore. If you wanted to keep the Hellmacrons silly, like Kay Applegate seemed to be set on doing, then find a way to do it without having the Animorphs go through another runaround. Uh-oh, look out, I'm about to get fanficky again. Let's roll with the gender movement stuff and say the Hellmacron male liberation movement starts seeing Marco, the guy who originally suggested it, as a figurehead for the movement. And suddenly Hellmacron MRAs are coming by the bucket load to seek his advice. Hellmacron females follow, and not to be outdone by the men's giant leader, they latch onto Rachel. Suddenly the two snarkiest Animorphs find themselves in control of armies, and it's become a farcical battle of the sexes, only with Pikmin. Is that a great idea? Not really, it took me a minute to come up with it, but at least it's a new idea that builds on continuity. As is, this book is a rerun stew, a stock plot with unpopular returning villains doing nothing new. And it's just not well written. Costello's crappy timekeeping just kills any momentum or tension the story might have had. The kid with a camera subplot amounted to nothing. The book gets rabies wrong, and the funniest joke is that everyone who lives in that apartment with the dog are in serious danger right now. But hey, this was the last of the lighthearted comedy-ish books. It's super dark and serious from this point on. I give number 42, The Journey, a 1 out of 10.